The writing style is sensational. Just like my bestie, Joe Jonas says, look at you, your anxieties got anxieties. I was bored. Sorry. I am a very anxious person. Sorry. Hi, my name is Fatima, but you can call me Fa. I'm a professional writer with romance and fantasy books published in Portuguese. And I'm also the editor-in-chief and founder of a Brazilian publishing house focused on fantasy books. Welcome to my channel. Here you'll find videos about my readings, especially fantasy books. And today I'm going to talk about the 20 books I read in March. Currently, I'm taking a break from work due to some health problems, and reading has helped me a lot to deal with my workaholic and the fact that I always feel guilty when I'm doing anything other than work. That's why I decided to start this channel, to use it almost as a therapy and to be able to talk to people who share my passion for books and to recommend books, I confess. Before we begin, there are two things I need to tell you. First, I'm a bilingual reader. I read English and Portuguese, but English isn't my native language, so my brain always thinks in both languages. Here in Brazil, apart from my boyfriend, I don't have anyone who speaks English, much less reads in English. So I rarely converse in English. That's why I might be a little hesitant in these first videos. But I'm determined to use this YouTube channel as a way to have people to speak English with, I hope. Secondly, I will leave my ratings at the end of each book review. And you can also see my opinions on Goodreads. I say this because I wanted to make it clear that any book I rate 3 stars or higher is a book I liked in some way. Below 3 stars, I saw many problems. To summarize, 1 star is a book I hated. 2 stars is a book I almost hated. 3 stars is a good book. 4 stars is a very good book, but not quite there yet. And 5 star is a perfect. Among the 5-star books, I may or may not have favorite them. And the half-star ratings are for when the book is actually going from 1 star to another. So, for example, if I give it 4.5 stars, it's because the book came even closer to being perfect. But I think I'm already saying too much. That's basically it. Oh, I almost forgot. Most of the books I read were ARCs, kindly made available to me by NetGalley and the publishers. Those I didn't receive on NetGalley, I probably already had on Kindle, or I read them on Audible or Everend. It depends a lot. I'll let you know in the video when the book has been released or not. Without further ado, let's go. Let's start with book number 1, An Arcane Inheritance. Actually, I had started this book before it was released, in December, but I got sick, as I mentioned, and only got back to reading it on March 11. I hadn't read anything before March 11, so we can consider that the first day of reading in March and the first day of reading in the year. The ebook was made available by NetGalley, and I would like to thank them and the publisher for sending it. The synopsis on Goodreads is: Warren University has stood amongst the Ivy elite for centuries, built on the bones and forbidden magic of its most prized BPOC students, hiding the rot of a sacred society that will do anything to keep their own powers burning bright, no matter who they must sacrifice along the way. Ellery Morgan is determined to prove that she belongs at Warren University, an Ivy League school whose history is deeply linked to occult rumors and dark secrets. But as she settles into her freshman year, something about the ornate buildings and shadowing paths feels strangely familiar. And with every passing day, that sense of deja vu grows increasingly sinister. Despite all logic, despite all reason, despite all the rules of reality, Ellery knows one thing to be true. She has been here before, and if she can convince broadening legacy student Hudson Graves to help her remember a past that seemed determined to slip through her fingers as if by some insidious magic, this time she may lose herself for good. Sorry. Now, let's talk about my opinions. Even with the months between my last reading and returning, I hadn't forgot any details and found myself immersed in this universe. Again, I wanted, above all, to comment on how incredible it was to read something from the perspective of an author who grew up in the United States but has born in Jamaica. Even if I hadn't read her biography at the end of the book before starting, I would have noticed that her culture was different from what we are used from North American. As someone who consumes a lot of content from the United States but wasn't born there and has never been to the country, this was extremely comforting, refreshing even. The story surprised me quite a bit, especially at 75% of the reading, and I found myself increasingly immersed in everything. It was a journey that used some common plot elements from other media, but added its own unique touch and left its mark. I doubt I forget the story, and I'm sure I will always remember the great dialogues between Ellery and Hudson. My deepest thanks to Camilla Cole for the story that deviates somewhat from what's currently standard in the fantasy market. I don't want to give any spoilers about the plot, but I can confirm that many of you'll be surprised by the twists and turns. I highly recommend reading it. 4.5 stars. Almost favorite. Almost. The second book that I read in March was Fated Rebirth. Also an arc made available by NetGalley. The synopsis is a dark academia fantasy romance series of divine rebellion, reincarnation, and vengeance. Violet Shaw remembers being killed. Attending the prestigious Shademore University on an equestrian archer scholarship, Violet expects and welcomes challenges, but not violent memories of another life where she was abducted, enslaved, and murdered. When the visions sharpen into certainty, Violet must find the man who killed her and end with him before he abducts another innocent. That's only one complication: her overly protective friend, Rowan Morrow. Once condemned to death for stealing a forbidden tome from the Forgotten Wastelands library, Rowan should have been erased from existence instead. Instead, the Fates had other plans. Reborn into the modern world, Rowan remembers every scene of his past, and the monster who claimed him. Now, bound to Violet as his unwilling guardian, he's dragged back into world. He's dragged back into a world he swore to abandon. When a student's murder throws Shadowmore University into lockdown, Rowan and Rowan and Violet are forced in closer quarters while searching for Violet's killer. Their investigation uncovers magic, broken myths, ruthless monsters, forsaken gods, and secret societies as they battle their inner, dem- inner demons from previous lives and fall into a forbidden love. A love they soon realize that could destroy them both. She is his ruin. He is her salvation. Together, they bring a future the gods fear. Although I really like prologues and use them a lot in my own writing, I felt there wasn't much needed for this particular prologue. It seemed like something highlighted at the wrong moment. Although I understand the reason for the scene being a prologue. Some of the thoughts and analogies has deeply bothered me since the beginning of the book, actually. Mainly because most of them are tied to a violent discourse that I perfectly understand in the context of the main character's life, but which cannot simply be ignored. Perhaps this bad feeling is exactly what the writing intended to do, so I think it's good to point it out. Something that bothered me was the way the adults, even knowing and experiencing reincarnation, refuse to believe that other supernatural things can happen or exist. If you remember your other lives when nobody else does, why the resistance to believing that anything else is real? Especially come from someone who has also reincarnated? This was one of the things that bothered me, but I think without giving too much away, this is the only one I can mention. Yeah. I confess I was very excited for this book. The concept thrilled me immensely, but I believe I expect something from I expect something that it wasn't, and that's entirely my fault. The writing is very good, but I couldn't see a certain logic in the world building. I think it's more for someone who enjoys romance with a touch of fantasy than for someone who only reads fantasy, like me. Perhaps the fact that I write fantasy and pay so much attention to creating a universe with rules that hold up ends up withering my reading experience in these cases. In many books, actually, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I felt the story was presented one way in the concept and synopsis, but turned out to be something else entirely in reality. I saw it much more as a daily life of the character than a book that dived deep in the supernatural concepts it proposed, actually. In fact, most of the time I was more concerned with understanding the concept of reincarnation in already adult body and having two souls in the same body than with the character's story itself. That was a shame. Finally, I think it's very worthwhile to give it a chance and form your own opinion. I would definitely read another fantasy book by this author. So 3 stars. Now the first 5 star of the month, Flickerstate. The month, yeah. Nora Sullivan has just discovered she's a person who can manipulate probability. The same day Nora's navigation manifests, she and her father are swarmed by possibility beasts. When a possibility beast bites you, your risk of death skyrockets, and pretty soon, her father gets sick. Desperate to find a cure, Nora applies to the Academy of Navigation, where there are rumors of restricted information of beast bites hidden in research archives. Once on campus, Nora learns that only senior research only senior research assistants are allowed in the archives, and you can only become one by winning a team trial designed to push your navigation abilities to the brink. She'll need to rely on her roommates as well as her peer mentor, the handsome Vic Souza, to win the competition. But trouble arises at every turn. There are tensions in the group, romantic complications, and unexplained student disappearances. As Nora gets deeper into the competition, she realizes not everything is as it seems, and the stakes are much higher than she ever could have imagined. Yeah. What an incredible book. And what an interesting magic system. Of course, I can't say it's a perfect book, especially since, from what I read, this is the author's debut. But the enormous care she puts in the story and in the universe is evident. And it's even more evident how her writing is destined to only improve as more books are published. I hope. In the beginning, things happen too fast, and I wanted to understand more about navigation and how to do that actually. I wanted to see more of the preparation, day to day classes, and how body and mind works before, during, and after navigation. But then things just keep getting better and better to the point where I found myself increasingly understanding how navigation and Flickerstate worked. Flickerstate, the book's name. And I started imagining what their world, our world, would be like with all that magic in it. And it is amazing, amazing, amazing. Before continuing, I think I need to point out that at times, especially in more normal school, college scenes, like parties and other gatherings, I felt the reading dragged a little. But I have to attribute that to the fact that I was very focused on the main story and anxious to get to the answers quickly. I am a very anxious person, sorry. Aside from that, the book was almost perfect for me. The characters, despite being young, were quite mature, and I especially enjoyed the friendships and the romance. Above all, I loved Nora's complexity and sensitivity, and I believe she was become one of my favorite female characters in YA fantasy, or rather in YA in general. I love the pop culture reference, probably because I love doing that in my books. So I guess it's more of a biased point of my part. And as a history nerd, I loved how the author insert magic and the universe in, into the real context of our history. And it would be easy to believe that something like that happening after that specific historical moment. I don't want to give spoilers. Finally, I was very surprised by the plot, and at the same time, every little detail was properly connected. And at the end, and nothing was let out. And I believe the book ended right there with no chance for sequels, but I would really read another one in the universe or with the characters, with Nora. I don't know. I highly recommend reading it, and even though the book hasn't been released yet, I'm eagerly waiting for another book by F.A. Davidson. 5 stars and favorite. Sorry, my brain is a little frozen and I am talking a little slow, a lot slowly, so slowly. So I apologize. I will get better by the year. I hope. And now a book that I don't like very much, and I'm sorry. I know a lot of people love it. So let's go. Fear, furry, and fire. Furry, furry. Furry is another thing. Fur. Anyway, to know is not enough. Power flows through the ancient halls of Avalon University like a never-ending flood. Admission to the elite institution enables students to hone their magic under the watchful eye of their icy headmaster. Summer Tuata? Tuata de Nana? Sorry. Summer planned to slide through her tenure at Avalon, unnoticed and inconspicuous. She has no interest in learning more about her past or why someone applied it to the school on her behalf. Her emotional walls keep everyone at bay, and her sharp tongue makes people give her a wide berth. Yet, despite her best attempts, her emotional armor begins to melt from her feral vampire roommate to the angelic senior who is never dissuaded by her painting disinterest. Maybe this could be good for her, a new life. Yet, dark secrets lurk in the halls of Avalon, and soon those same halls are drenched in blood. Summer finds herself at the obsession of the sadistic stalker with the 7 lessons to learn. With the help of her new friends, she races against the clock to solve the mystery, hoping to save lives and catch the killer before it's too late. Sorry, I am freezing all the time. Sorry. Most of the time I am reading. I I I just said that in the beginning, but I read a lot. I listen a lot. My life is English all around. Besides the people, I read in English. I listen and see movies, musicals, series, reality TV, so many things in English. And my boyfriend worked with Americans at some point here in Brazil, calling Americans calling him, and I can I can understand English better than he. Accents and all. Probably because I like very much. I like things from Great Britain, United Kingdom, One Direction, Pride and Prejudice. Anyway, I almost spoke Portuguese now. Sorry. I am trying to do the conversation more. Like I said, I don't have anyone to talk English with. My boyfriend I have, but we don't talk English naturally. We consume arts in English all the time, but we don't talk. So I'm sorry, I'm frozen at times. But I will get better. I promise I will try. Now back to what's the name of the book? Now back to Blood and Betrayals. Let's go. I need to say that I committed to being very honest in all of the reviews of arcs that I do. And I was also upfront that this book wasn't for me. But I want to point out the strengths and weakness because I think that's always the right thing to do. Also, I am a writer, so I I know what it feels like to read a review. I was unfortunately quite bothered that the main character mentioned to have walls and doesn't let anyone get close, only to immediately starting acting like best friends with a girl she just met. Then even go to a party and everything gives the impression that they know each other their whole lives, or at least for a few months, weeks, but hours. No, nothing is that deep. So I was bothered by that. In fact, they know almost nothing about each other, but they don't even bother to talk, to question things. I don't know. That was strange. Initially, everyone is being very immature. Very. I don't know if that was intentional or if they will evolve after that. I don't know. There is another books. I don't know how many books. Generally, when I read about magic academies or universities, I expect to see the classes and see in the classes how the universe works and at least how the magic works. But I was very bothered that with 10% of the way in a book with 800 pages, we learn almost nothing. And the character seems uninterested in everything. The classes on the first day happened too quickly, and nothing was truly intriguing or good enough to hold my attention in those specific scenes. So I was bored. Sorry. But I can't be hypocritical and say that I haven't read fantasy books that somewhat ignore the classes that talked about the world or the magic system, and sometimes I didn't see a problem because the rest of the story captivated me. But unfortunately, I was bothered by some things in the book and couldn't just ignore them. And seeing the classes being on average 1 or 2 pages, sometimes less, and having almost no teaching bothered me. Even though it was the first day of class, I expected something, anything. Aside from that, the fact that after class they go to the library and only have a brief awkward dialogue with a new character with no mention of the books borrowed, subjects studied, or any new information about the universe bothered me again. But I was also very curious about the vibe of the book and decided to continue. I am almost speaking Portuguese. Sorry. Some some words are close enough. Almost. Sorry. Then the romance started and deeply irritated me.
Fátima, aqui está seu lembrete. Comida dos gatos.
It started too fast with sex scenes, chapter after chapter, without real conversations, development, or depth, which was a shame. I thought Summer and Connor had everything to be a great couple, but it didn't work in practice, not for me. For someone who expects to see more of the magical world and fantasy, I was very frustrated. It was very frustrating to see that what it mostly offered was just a college day to day with parties, many childish mistakes, and all this coming from characters who, if I'm not mistaken, must be in 25, 28 age range. Yeah, I think it's that. But my biggest problem with this book is precisely its length. I don't know. I don't know if it's because I work editing fantasy books precisely, but I always end up getting even more annoyed when I see a long fantasy that I know should have about 200 fewer pages. And that was exactly the case with this book. I believe that because it's so long, most readers won't even notice some details that caught my attention. Many things are mentioned at the beginning or throughout the book and never explained or mentioned again. For a book that sells itself as epic, new, dark academia romantasy, we barely saw the classes, the magic system, and even worse, the epic aspect was lost to a romance focuses on excessive excessive sex scenes and a lack of communication between the characters. But I don't think that there is good communication with all the characters. I'm sorry. Summer hid many things from Connor, and she barely developed as a character. Perhaps it's because the goal is to evolve her throughout each book in the series, but I was very sad to see a character with so much potential just get lost. There was no evolution, quite the opposite. Speaking of characters, none of them captivate me, and I didn't feel anything to hate them either. Sorry. I remain indifferent, and I think that was one of the main factors in losing interest. I want to love a character, some characters. I really like the writing, and even more so the world building and everything that comes from that universe. But that also left something to be desired because they barely told us what the world was actually like and how the magic system worked. And it was more frustrating than usual because it's an academy where we should learn about these things, along with the characters. I believe that with more world building and exploration of the magic within it, and with more focus on fantasy, future books could be better, but I don't know if I intend to continue. Furthermore, I believe it's a book that should be appreciated more by those who enjoy or expect a college romance with artists, drinking, smut, and recklessness. There is always a right time to read a book, and I believe I would have enjoyed this one more if I were younger, but it certainly wasn't the right time for me. But I think everyone should give it a chance and not just go by my judgment, my big judgment. I will definitely read another fantasy by these art authors in the future to see if they manage to further highlight their strengths and raise what I don't like. 2.5 stars. And hours later, we are back. I just get home. I was in therapy. So, yeah. As I mentioned before, I am sick and now I do therapy. Just like my bestie Joe Jonas says, look at you, your anxieties got anxieties. But next book, A Dance with Death. Corliss Bell would do anything to bring her older sister Aven back to life. She'd give up her dreams of being a professional ballerina. She resigned herself to never leaving the small seaside town of the Pins. Hell, she would even make a deal with a demon. After all, demons are masters of death. When a town mystic tells Corliss there is a demon living nearby who may be the key in returning Aven to life, she is emboldened by the idea of getting her beloved sister back. Corliss sneaks into the demon's dilapidated mansion to beg for his help, but instead of finding him, she discovers a pair of enchanted red ballet slippers and steals them. Under the strange, obsessive spell of the stolen shoes, Corliss is hailed as a prodigy and welcomed onto the stage of the prestigious Red Clover Dance Hall to rapturous applause. However, Corliss starts having unsettling nightmares and hearing voices, and she is fairly certain someone or something is watching her. The demon comes to reclaim what is his, but finds Corliss and the sleepers hopelessly intertwined. He imprisons her in his mansion, forcing her to dance for him every evening as punishment for stealing. Far from a helpless captive, Corliss begins working out a plan to bring Aven back to life, as soon as she can convince the demon, Orin, to help her. But first, she has to prove that she is not just some common thief. As she slowly realizes, she may not hate Orin nearly as much as she pretends to. She finds herself diving deeper into his strange, dark world. My sister is a dancer, and when I'm not working on writing and editing fantasy books, which I'm not doing right now, or when I'm not reading fantasy, of course, I'm enjoying her dance performances. And I've also been to a few ballet performances. But no, my sister don't do ballet. She dances contemporary. So I went into A Dance with Death, hoping to feel the same way I feel when I see my sister dance. Especially since the main character also has a sister. But that's not what happened. Corliss mostly mentioned the names of the dance steps, leaving my head spinning so much with terminology, but without being able to imagine any of the dance steps. I imagine that for someone who has never seen a ballet in person, it must have been even harder to try to understand the dances. I would have loved to see a little description of the dance to understand what each name actually indicated. I believe that it will be a great addition to the future books. I know there is another book. I have already the arc for this other book. Besides, at some points there was only mention that she danced without any further explanation. This point was my main problem with the book. also really would have liked to see more depth in the romance, in the sisters' relationship, and I wanted to see more emotion coming through everyone, actually. I believe this will be revisited in the next book. And I believe the incredible atmosphere of this universe will intensify. Finally, I'd like to point out that the writing is beautiful. And I think many readers will mark quote after quote. I recommend to everyone, especially those who enjoy a romance with a fantasy setting. This book is a solid 3 stars. Summoned to the Wilds is a second book. So I can talk about the plot. Interestingly, I had already read this book last year, if I'm not mistaken, and I had also read other books by the author. I really like her writing. I always find it very easy to read, even easier to get involved in the story. It always has a light touch and a lot of fantasy, which I love. Since it's a sequel, I will try to avoid spoilers as much as possible. But I can say that I liked even more reading it now, perhaps because it was exactly the kind of story I needed. Damien and Emma are incredible, even more so in this book than in the first one. And it's visible and admirable how they are evolving as characters and as a couple. I love the balance between a certain amount of drama, romance, and humor. And the magic, of course. The book is full of adventures too, but I imagine you already know that. To further demonstrate how much I enjoyed this book, I think it's important to point out that I generally don't like comedies, especially those that everyone says are examples of good comedies. But I usually love it when others mix romance and fantasy with intelligent and sometimes very light humor. Still trying not to give away too many spoilers, I can say that quite a lot happens in this book, even more compared to the first one. At no point did I want to pause my reading. No point. In fact, I read it all from beginning to end without stopping for several hours. I highly recommend it, and I'm eager to read the sequel soon. Solid 4 stars. And the next book is, wait, I don't know if I know how to say this. Okay, Weavingshaw. At least someone said that way on TikTok. And when I was researching for speak the name, I found out that this book was very late February book. I don't know if in romantasy, young adult fantasy, I don't know. I just wanted to say that I live in Brazil and here I don't have access to Fairloot, but I would love to. Weavingshaw, another amazing book. 3 years ago, Lina Al-Sayed awoke with a terrible power. She can see the death. Since then, she has hidden herself from the world, knowing that if she ever reveals her curse, she will be locked away in an asylum. When her beloved brother, Hemi, falls fatally ill, Lina is faced with a terrible choice. Let him die or buy the expensive medicine that will save his life by bartering the only valuable thing she has, her secret. The Scent of Silence, a ruthless merchant who trades in confessions and is shrouded in unearthly rumors of cruelty and power, accepts her bargain for a deadly price. Lina must find the ghost of Percival Avon, the last lord of Weavingshaw, or lose her freedom to descend forever. As Lina search takes her and descend to Weavingshaw, she finds the state and the surrounding moors to be living things, hungry for blood and sacrifice. Fighting against Weavingshaw might, Lina must also fight her growing pull toward the enigmatic Saint himself, whose connection to Percival Avon remains a mystery. As the house begins to entomb them, time is running out on their desperate hunt for answers. For Lena has come to see that here in Weavingshaw that are not hushed, and some secrets are better left buried with them. I only didn't finish this book faster because of the rush of daily life. Otherwise, I would have finished it in one sitting. The author is from Iran. Iran. I don't know how to say it in English. Iran in my language is Iran. Anyway, the author is from Iran, but from her brief biography, it's clear she has lived a lot of the immigrant experience, and this is evident in this book. It's revealing and at the same time sad to realize how immigration accounts can be quite negative, especially since I live in a country, Brazil, full of immigrants. And I always thought they were treated well all over the world. The book even made me reflect on whether I was the one who saw the situation of immigrants as good, or if my country really treats them better. I hope to find out the answer someday. I love the mix of ghost fantasy, politics, family secrets, and demons. I was surprised. I was surprised from the beginning to the end. I generally like faster paced books in terms of constant action, but I think the more measured pace was perfect for this plot. The writing style is sensational, and the characters' voices were very clear in my mind, almost as I was listening to an audiobook with multiple narrators, which proves how sensationally the writing was done. I'm usually a bit skeptical about debuts, and I look for points where I could tell the author they could improve, but I can't think of anything in this book. I don't want to give spoilers, but I was just saying that the last chapters leave you with a huge desire to read the sequel. I hope to read it soon, and I highly recommend it. 5 stars, favorite. I am using my Kindle to track the books that I read. Here are all the books that I read in March. Here. It's strange because a lot of the arcs don't have cover, so almost seems like I downloaded from a strange website, if you know what I mean. But I don't do that. Anyway, Eternal is the Night, an elite private college, missing initiates. A truth that will change everything. 20-year-old Anna was already different before her mother was murdered. And before she vanished for a year, she can't remember. When her former mentor returns, Anna embarks on a dangerous journey to Nightfall Castle, the mysterious private college her mother once attended, desperate for answers about her past and the dormant powers she's ignored her entire life. But Nightfall is not an ordinary college. Something is terribly wrong with the castle ancient corridors. Initiates are disappearing, and the Iraqi, Nightfall's most elite, know more than they are willing to say. Blake, the most alluring and dangerous of the Iraqi, may be the key to uncover Nightfall's secrets, or the reason she never escapes them. As the danger closes in, Anna realizes she may be next, and the truth behind Nightfall may cost her everything. Discover the truth hidden within Nightfall Castle in this dark, seductive debut of the Cursed Realm saga. This book was a big surprise. Eternal is the Night was I read full of twists and turns that always left me anxious for the answers to come. And it also brought me many other questions. I really liked how we were as clueless as Anna, and I love discovering things along with her. It's evident that the attention to the detail in the world and its history was prioritized. leaving me even more eager to explore. The academic setting was also very satisfying, and it was ideal for both us and the protagonist to begin to understand the universe, I think. However, I need to point out that at times the information was just thrown, and I felt a little buried under so much info dump. I also felt a little overwhelmed by the sheer number of characters throughout the journey, to the point that at the end, when it was important to remember them all, I barely remember half of them. Despite being a considerably long book, I believe it would have been beneficial to have a few dozen more pages to better develop these secondary characters and their relationships in general. Finally, I think the book's greatest strength is the world building combined with an atmosphere of profound mystery, especially regarding the year Anna simply can't remember. I believe that if the author addressed the shortcomings, the next book in the series could be even better. I recommend reading it, and I intend to continue reading the saga. 3.5 stars. And next is Letters from the Last Apothecary. Apothecary. No. I keeps. Wow. Apothecary. Now. Emily Wilde meets divine rivals in this light romantic fantasy epistolary novel about a grumpy apothecarist, the whirling wing, oh god, woman who comes to save his shop, and the letters that secretly unite them. You got mail with a magical twist. Josie Pinova doesn't believe in fate until fate seems to believe in her. The day after she's fired, she wanders in the last magical apothecary in Transport and lands an unexpected job. It's not ideal, but it buys her time and a paycheck while she waits to hear if she's being accepted into the city's prestigious Institute of Magic. Aufidius Reed doesn't believe in luck, and Josie feels like the worst kind. Opinionated, charming, and infuriatingly outsmarting him at every turn, she makes him feel like he's constantly a step behind. To her, he's uptight and impossible. Neither suspects they are already falling for each other through a months-long exchange of anonymous letters as fellow Institute hopefuls. In the shop, they clash. On page, they fall in love. But with the apothecary slated to close in 6 months, another casualty of Transport's rapid industrialization and rising anti-magic sentiment, they have to fight for more than just their livelihoods. Josie is determined to prove that women like her belong in the world of structured spell work. Reed is just a set of mastering his unruly magic and outrunning the past that's held him back. Saving the shop might be their only shot at meaningfully magic, at true purpose, and at each other. Set against the smoke-choked skyline of Transport inside a lush, green sanctuary of plants and old magics, this is a story of mistaken identity, reluctant partnership, and the quiet magic of being truly seen on and off the page. I must begin by saying that the strongest point of the story is the beautiful writing. Both of the letters and the narration, the enormous care taken in the construction of sentences and the choice of words is undeniable. It was as if the whole time I was friends with Josie and Reed, and I could see the complexity of their distinct personalities, as well as the commonalities they seem to refuse to acknowledge. However, I need to point out that my biggest problems were with the way the story was conducted and the way the characters' antipathy was created. Antipathy. In many places, it seemed like just a mutual dislike, especially on Reed's part. The way the hatred began doesn't seem very believable for me, and it gave me the impression that it was mainly a plot device to keep the story going the way that the author was wanting. Unfortunately, it seems a little forced, and this hindered all the other interactions between the characters. Since this is a book with more romance than fantasy, it was very important to me that the couple be well developed, and I felt there was little development in that regard, I must point out. Furthermore, I would definitely read another book by this author, and I recommend this to anyone who loves cozy fantasy, especially if the reader's focus is on romance. And I think the two books that were mentioned in the synopsis, Emily Wilde, The Divine Arrivals, yeah, is the base, I think. 3 stars. And we are in the middle. And I now feel like that scene in High School Musical 3. Try. And right now I can hardly breathe. But we are just in the middle. I am thinking that I am talking too much, but I like to talk, and I'm feeling more comfortable with speaking English. I think it would be funny to see this video because I'm so much frozen in the beginning, and now I am. Anyway, it would be at least funny, I think. At least. I I hope you like it. I really hope. And I am also already thinking about the future videos. So I hope you like it. I hope you can continue with me. And I will try to be more fast. And now is a book that I like it and didn't like after. I am not going to read the synopsis of The Poisoner because I recently discovered some controversies involving the author that made me uncomfortable. But I had already read the book before, and it was sent from NetGalley, so I will give my opinion anyway, even though my rating was dropped from what was before. I also have the second book on Arc, so on Arc and Arc. Can't think of it right now. Anyway, I have the arc of the second book on NetGalley. But I'm thinking a lot about whether or not I will read all DNF. But now let's go to my opinion about this book. Yeah. The Poisoner was a different kind of read that I'm used to. Although I read several books with poisoners as main characters, and even more with vampires, Twilight, the mix was very refreshing. Although the reading wasn't light at all. I love books with dual point of view, especially when the characters are so different. The hatred here is real, justifiable, and little by little you see a relationship being created. Desire, lust, and even a form of affection are introduced. Kind of a friendship. I don't know if we can call it a friendship. Anyway, I initially really enjoyed the story, the plot twists, and I was fascinated by how the author made me hate and then start to like Silas until I end up hating him again. It was a very unexpected loop of feelings. The greatest strength of the story is certainly our person, our poisoner, Alina, with an admirable complexity and responsible for making us distrust everyone around her, even when he trusts someone. I enjoyed the story in the first place. And the only reasons I didn't give it more stars are the ending, which I found too rushed and too violent. Sure, I already knew more or less what to expect from the book in terms of violence, and I understand very well the intention behind all the horrific scenes. But I believe that the very fact that they were so well written is what makes me even more averse. And although it's by no means a mistake, I also need to protect my emotional well being. So I am pointing it out. Otherwise, I was eager to read the sequel, and I already had the arc. Remembering some things from the book days later, I decided to lower my rating, mainly because I have the impression that the second book won't deliver the revenge I expected, but rather a redemption arc from someone I don't think deserves it. And I hope I'm wrong, but I don't know. We need to see in the second book. So 2.5 stars, and I think the second book will be a DNF, a language of dragons. This one I already had in my Kindle. I can tell it was a great read, very fun, but I couldn't think of a review without spoilers, so I didn't write a review. Just say it's a 4-star rating. Here the synopsis. Welcome to Bletchley Park with Dragons, London, 1923. Dragons soar through the skies and protests erupt on the streets. But Vivian Swallow isn't worried. She's going to follow the rules, get an internship studying dragon language, and make sure her little sister never has to risk growing up third class. By midnight, Viv has started a civil war. With her parents arrested and her sister missing, all the safety Viv has worked for is collapsing around her. So when a lifetime is offered in the form of a mysterious job, she grabs it. Lifetime? Lifeline. Arriving at Bletchley Park, Viv discovers that she has been recruited as a codebreaker helping the war effort. If she succeeds, she and her family can all go home again. If she doesn't, they all will die. At first, Viv believes that her challenge of discovering the secrets of a hidden dragon language is doable. But the more she learns, the more she realizes that the bubble she's grown up isn't as safe as she thought, and eventually Viv must decide, what war is she really fighting? This book was setting in Great Britain, and I love Great Britain. I love United Kingdom. My dream is to be there someday. And yeah, I love the atmosphere. So I definitely will read the second book that I already have, but I don't know when. So this was a language of dragons, and yeah, 4 stars. In the dark of the night, there is passion and destruction. Criminal defense attorney Ember thought the biggest challenge of her life would be her quest to navigate the justice system on behalf of the wrongly accused. That is, until she finds herself in the sight of an otherworldly evil, desperately hunting what she cannot kill. Not yet, at least. Nothing in her life or in this world is what it seems, and when a blue-eyed strange named Mika saves her life, their attraction is the fire that could become the death of all that exists, or the salvation that blooms with new hope for all. Mika, royalty in his own right, will challenge her to stand against evil. But when you have never known true evil, can you really recognize it when it hides? In a world where angels and demons are the truth humans call fiction, could it be a lie between lovers that equals salvation? Or is that light the blade that delivers devastation? What? Or is that light the blade that delivers devastation? What? Ember and Ash, the first book in the Thorn saga, introduces you to a world filled with the magic of angels and the darkness of the monsters they hunt, where secrets and lies and a passionate forbidden romance hold world-altering consequence. Oh god, what a hard synopsis! When I started Ember and Ash, I was very excited to see a protagonist exactly my age, 27, working in a field really discussed in books, especially fantasy. Right away, I became attracted to the universe, to what was presented as magic, and history per- pertaining to angels and demons. But the more the story developed, the more frustrated I became, especially with Mika. I would say Mika. The book started full of action and quickly captivated me, but the development became slower, repetitive, and it was quite frustrating to see how Mika's answer to everything was read the book. As a reader and as someone who needed hundreds of books to graduate in the academic field, I am graduated in a course named Letras, which for you will be something like English with literature. Yeah, I think it's that. Anyway, as I was saying, I always used reading as a form of knowledge and addiction to entertainment. So I wouldn't be frustrated by this without reason. So here are the reasons. But I have several reasons. Being a fantasy book, you want to discover the world as the characters live it, not by having everything in books. Mika is stubborn and refuses to reveal anything so as not to contaminate Amber's vision. Irritate me to the point that I started to dislike the couple and him. It was not an academic setting, so it was frustrating. Yes. In fact, the couple that initially made me want to continue the story unfortunately made me want to stop reading, but I did not stop. The way Mika hid almost everything from Amber, and even telling her that he wouldn't like humans, made the relationship seems forced, and he lied to her. He says at the beginning that he would not lie to her like the humans, but he lies. He hides things. It was like as if he controlled everything, in fact. His overprotectiveness also weighted down the reading to the point that I no longer believed that he truly understood the strength Amber represented. And so it was like he thought that she was weak, and she was not. Finally, I would have liked to see more about the magic and the magical world, the creatures, what I'm saying. Anyway, the things, the devils, the monsters, and I wish that there had been a greater focus on the answers Amber needs. I quite like the universe, so yeah, I intend to continue it. I intend to read the sequel as soon as it comes out. So, 3 stars. White Lights. It's a book about angels from the same author as Fallen. And I was shocked when the publisher accepted my request on NetGalley because it was one of the books that I was most eager to get this year. When mysterious Rafe de la Cruz rose into Desdemona's life to recruit her to the elite film school Acheron, death has no reason to trust him, and no other option. A violent attack has just put her brother in the hospital, and Des is the only suspect. Guilt-ridden and grieving, she finds herself running from the law to chase her longtime dream of making movies at a school she's never heard of. Soon, she's dropped in Acheron's cutthroat world of seductive intrigue, power on an otherworldly scale, and deadly competition. My cat is playing. Acheron may seem like the ticket to a future Des has always wanted, but as she delves deeper into the secret world being done there, she finds herself trapped in an existential conflict on a cosmic scale, with more than her heart on the line. I need to point out here that I don't know if I am wrong, but you see that I made a connection with Fallen that I don't know if is right, but if you read Fallen, maybe you would think the same thing as I did. But from the reviews that I read, the book already isn't out there yet. No one mentions anything like what I connected. So I don't know if I am delusional, but let's go. I loved Fallen as a teenager, and it was the book that made me love plots with angels for the rest of my life. I always wanted to have that incredible feeling that Fallen gave me, but I was looking for it in other angel books. So imagine my excitement when I saw that Lauren Cage had written another book with angels. What a unique, incredible, and at the same time nostalgic experience. Oh God. It's wonderful to see that the universe she created in Fallen manages to expand in White Lights. No longer teenagers, but adults passionate about the idea of making good films. Angels a little more concerned with the kernel and consequences for angelic life that came directly from the last books of Fallen series, and which probably won't be understood by those who haven't read them. Sorry. Without wanting to give spoilers again, what I can say is that I fell even more in love with the creation of the universe and the hierarchy of angels, even more so with the consequences that Fallen left in its wake. Just ask Sam. This isn't a spoiler because it's in the prologue. Anyway, I also love this, and I was in a love-hate loop with Rafe, but I believe that was intentional. I just felt that Asher lacked a bit of development, and I think those who read to the end will understand why. However, I have one problem with the universe, and it was a problem from beginning to end, and it was definitive in lowering my final score. Lust. I even feel puritanical talking about it this way, but I couldn't see any motivation for sex and lust to be such a central point in the plot. I mean, the book takes care to explain it in a certain way, but it didn't seem like a good enough reason to me. And unfortunately, many of the moments involving sex seemed a little forced, and even this diminished the impact of this and Rafe's relationship a bit. Otherwise, I'm sure I'll be thinking about the book for a long time to come because mainly of the world building and because I really want to know what happens next. I am eagerly waiting the sequel for that's Rafe and Asher, and I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite books of the year so far, but I don't put in the favorite book because I think other books I like other books more. So 4 stars. The next book is a sequel, so I won't discuss the story. I will just say my opinion. A Forsaken Prophecy finally proved that it's possible to write a great second book in a trilogy. First of all, I want to congratulate Stacey McIan for not letting the book fall into the second book curse, especially after reading her acknowledgement saying it was the most difficult book she's ever written. It was a truly great job, I must say. When I read A Forbidden Alchemy, I felt something was missing, but I couldn't be sure what it was. And in A Forsaken Prophecy, I think Stacey McKeon found just what was missing, creating almost the perfect second book. I'm super in love with Patrick and Nina, and it was sensational to see the various changes in voice and tone from different points of view in the book, showing how well everything was structured. In fact, having more points of view was one of the main changes from the previous book to this book. I was also hooked by various betrayals and plot twists, especially the big twist in the end of the book. I can't say the book is perfect because despite starting off incredibly strong and quickly drawing me back in the universe around 50, 70 mark, it slowed down a bit, and the various point of view were the main factors that reduced the pace. As for the characters, my favorites were definitely Patrick and Nina, and Miss Trunk. Miss Trunk also charmed me very quickly. The idea of her talking with music, with piano, was certainly brilliant, and I could visualize the scenes described with her very well. So I think that is a very strong point. I also wanted to say that their great search for information and translations was incredible, and I hope to see much more of that in book 3. That said, I highly recommend reading it, and I'm eagerly awaiting the sequel. 4 stars. Magic is real, demons walk the earth, and Max's brother is dead. Max Asher, Jewish mystic and private eye, never thought he would be coming back to his hometown to bury his twin brother, Solomon. He definitely never thought the funeral would turn into a case, but when Saul's widow, Gabby, asks him to investigate the cause of that, Uncle Max is on the job. When Max kicks the demon's nest, he uncovers a conspiracy that forces him to reevaluate everything he thought he knew about his brother. Unfamiliar local politics blur the line between the supernatural and the mundane, and soon, fighting for justice becomes dangerously literal. If Max can uncover the murderer, he might just save his brother's soul, but if he can't, he will fall victim to the same deadly fate. Putting the past to rest is going to take more than a shovel full of dirt. My Brother's Keeper was a surprise to me, actually. To begin with, I hadn't realized that the mention of Judaism, in Portuguese is Judaismo, so I don't know if I'm saying this right. The mention of Judaism in the synopsis would have such an impact on the story, but the author's initial note on the arc made that quite clear. In fact, I think it's important to point out that the fact that I don't know much about Judaism and don't have much experience with it is precisely what so impacts my experience with the book. During the reading, there were some mentions of exclusively Jewish traditions and very characteristic terms and names. Although at some points the author explained what some terms meant, I felt a bit lost in everything, especially the jokes. And after reading some other reviews before writing mine from people with knowledge of Judaism, I realized that they were perfect from those who knew Jewish tradition. And it was even more difficult to follow than to follow a book with a completely new world, something that I do all the time, but I can't keep up with Jewish traditions. I was so lost that the reading doesn't go so well. By the other hand, I must praise the author, sensational and captivating writing. He wrote a mysterious, dark book that leads you to several reflections. Max is a super engaging character, and even without fully understanding his humor, I could perceive how good humored he was, if that makes sense. Even after losing a brother, and even without having seen this brother for years, he demonstrates a certain lightness and even leads us to reflect on everything we should do before it's too late. I also love the mix of demons, small town politics, with more emotional things intrinsic to human beings, such as grudges and secrets. It's very impactful to see how we can find other versions of the people we love with size we wouldn't even dream of. And the atmosphere of the book is dark, but not to the point of making you uncomfortable. It's captivating, calling you to more. Finally, I recommend the book to everyone, but especially to those who have some knowledge of the Jewish tradition so that they don't feel as lost as I did. So I would definitely read another book by the author, and 3 stars. Daggermouth is the best dystopian novel in recent times, without a doubt. The first thing you'll learn in Newfound Heaven is that mercy doesn't exist. The second thing is that from the highest glass atrium in the heart to the windowless slums of the boundary, the Veira are always watching. The last lesson is the hardest, but you must remember it. Love outside of your ring is a death sentence. The city is carved into rings of privilege and poverty, ruled by the masked elite who will do whatever it takes to hold on to power. Obedience is demanded, rebellion is crushed. Grayson Sarrow has spent his life caught between two worlds. Publicly, he's the flawless heir to the presidents. Privately, he's entangled in secrets that could topple the regime. But when he's forced into a political marriage meant to bind him tied to the government's brutal laws, he finds himself shackled to a bride as little as she is unwilling. Shadera Kael is a mercenary raised to kill, not to wed. Yet, when her bullet misses its mark, survival leaves her tied to the very man she was sent to eliminate. Trapped inside the corrupt heart of the city, she becomes both prisoner and wife. Her every step watched, her every move tested. Their union is no love story, it's a battlefield. As secrets comes to light and betrayal fester within the walls of power, Grayson and Shadera must decide between annihilating each other, or burning the city to the ground together. In a world where passion has consequences and loyalty is paid for in blood, their first bond may be the spark that ignites a revolution, or the fire that consumes them both. It will be very difficult to talk about Daggermouth without giving spoilers, but I will try my best. I have to confess that I didn't have very high expectations for this book because lately I haven't liked most of the books that are being talked about on the internet, the popular books. But Daggermouth was an excellent exception, and I can already say that it has become one of my favorite books ever, and I think the favorite of this year until now. It's also important to point out, first of all, that it's not an easy book to read in terms of the themes it deals and the violence above all. But I believe that those who are used to dystopian fiction already expect it to be like that. So yeah, I expected, and even so, I found myself shocked at various moments. On the other hand, the writing is super engaging, full of exciting nuances, strong, and is wonderful, so wonderful. Throughout the reading, I was moved and horrified. Hi! Hi! Throughout the reading, I was moved and horrified in equal measure, and this only shows how well crafted the story was. I thought I understood what the final plot twist would be, and I even thought I was right when it arrived, but no! One huge plot twist after another and another and another. And the last 10% are even more exquisite. And I really can't give any spoilers, but I can say that. But I'm sure you wouldn't guess what's coming. I'm eager for what's to come, and I hope the second book arrives soon. Finally, I recommend this book 1,000,000%, and I even think it's a must read. But please watch out for trigger warnings before reading it. 5-star favorite. Now let's talk about a series of 3 books with romances that I found problematic in some way. What are you doing? He doesn't understand English. By the way, his name is Agis, Hades. Yeah, the Greek god. And his brother is Zeus. But call I can call them in English because they wouldn't understand. So it's funny because in my head I always do jokes in English and I never say them out loud. So it's like I am talking to someone and I am talking to someone. Someone will see this, I hope. Because yeah, I think I am talking for 5 hours right now. I don't think that this video would be 5 hours. I hope so. Let's go. A witch prophesied to save them all. An unforgiven world where dragons rule Rome. I hate Rome. Julian Dacia, Roman general and nephew to the emperor, has played his role as conqueror well. Yet, the moment he laid eyes on Malina, he was enthralled by the Dacian dancer. Years later, the fierce beauty stands before him, a captive on a scarred battlefield, her life in danger. He instinctively shifted into his fierce dragon form to save her, an action that may mean his head on the Imperial Gate. The rules of the world dictate that he is the conqueror and she is the captorate. But he and his dragon know one thing. Their bond has nothing to do with the laws of mighty Rome. She belongs to them, and they belong to her. Fierce and powerful, 21-year-old Malina has survived the loss of her family, and she is determined to fight until her dying breath. Still, she can't believe that this centurion who had once bestowed a secret talisman on her is the Roman general of legendary brutality, and now holds her life in his hand. Nor can she deny how her soul has always seemed to answer his. Slowly, she learns that Julian is caught in his mad uncle's machinations for domination and helps him plot the downfall of the empire itself. As they navigate a world where flying death riders conquer and burn, their love will ignite in a fierce storm that can only end in heartbreak or death, or both. Firebird is a fantasy with some dark themes, including elements of master-slave relationship, attempted sexual assault, not between the main characters, and dubious consent, not between the main characters. Readers who may be sensitive to these elements, please take note. I could remove this while reading the synopsis, but I think this is important, so read the trigger warning. It's curious because I had already started reading Firebird last year, but when I was about halfway through, I discovered that there was a sequel. There was going to be a sequel. So I decided to wait to read it to the end when I had the second book with me. Because the reading was so good. And a few days ago, I acquired the arc of the sequel, which the publisher so kindly sent me, and I decided to read it again from the beginning to read book 2. And it was the best decision I made. Firebird is such an engaging book that I literally read it from beginning to end in one sitting without pauses. I became attached to Malina and Julian from the prologue, and I was enchanted to see their relationship develop. But I will give no spoilers. As a history nerd, I'm addicted to everything from ancient Greece, and perhaps some of you will understand why. I also have a deep hatred for everything from the Roman Empire, so the book was extremely satisfying in that respect as well. The Rome we see in Firebird is almost tangible, and I got to rate the Rome I always loved to hate. The only reason, one of the only reason actually, for Firebird don't be a perfect book for me was because of the sex scenes. I always feel very puritanical when I point these things out, but I need to be honest with myself and evaluate this point of as well. The problem was that the scenes happened too many times, and at times without seeming necessary at all. The end of the book gave me a strong feeling that everything as was properly closed. And there is a very good reason for that. And I can tell you why, because it's in the synopsis of the sequel. The next book is from another point of view, another character, another couple. And yes, is directly connected to the couple of the first book. So you have to read the first book to read the second book. And I can tell is it now because I read the two books. I highly recommend it to those who love romance and dragons. And I will connect the sequel right now and say the things about the sequel. But I need to say that I strongly should suggest you read the trigger warning first. And like the synopsis said, there is a master-slave relationship between the protagonists, and that's always a huge no for me. But while reading, I sensed some nuance that indicate that the master didn't harm his slaves, but initially he seemed completely in favor of slavery. So I must point it out. And it's quite typical of that period. And being in fantasy, I I wish that could have been left out. But I also understand the purpose of being there. There's also a lot of violence against women, and again, I wish that this was never in books, and yeah, but I understand the purpose as well. And I really hope these were specific themes of this book and they won't be repeated so much in the series. But I will always try to understand the author's intention. 4 stars. Now let's go to the second book. In many ways, Bloodsinger is an improvement over Firebird. To begin with, one of the things that bothered me most in the first book was the master-slave relationship and how at times the characters seemed oblivious to the problems around them. Almost give the impression that the author also didn't understand the problematic nature of the relationship, especially when viewed through lens of the present day. In Bloodsinger, however, there is a notable care in how the situation of slaves is treated and in general. And it's gratifying to see that Trajan never considers Lila a slave and never thinks of making her his slave. That's a very good point. On the contrary, his main object is to free her from slavery. So, very good point again. Even Lila's gift of requesting blood is reasonable to assume she always needed to resort to violence on different scales, one might say. Violence against women is still a strongest point in the book, but I felt a little more care was taken in how it was handled, and I believe this is because of the sensitive reader that the author mentions in the acknowledgments. There is more focus on politics here compared to the first book, and the female protagonist is more independent. Regarding politics, it was interesting to see how Trajan and his grandfather planned it step by step. The language and dialogues are also more mature at times, I believe, due to the characters' personalities, especially Trajan, who is more much more affectionate than Julian. Trying my best not to give spoilers, I can also say that I love the fact that Trajan had to earn Lila's trust before they even start a friendship. However, I also need to talk about the things that bother me and made the reading experience inferior to Firebird. Oh my god. Although I understand how violence involving sex was recurrent in the historical period reference, it still bothers me to see it portrayed in the book. Even more so seeing how some slaves were forced to satisfy twisted desire of their masters, one might say. Even knowing that this was a fact, I didn't want to see it repeated in books. So, yeah. Even more so in fantasies that allow you to go further and change the rules. Roman Empire with dragons. We can take off the bad things. And once again, I have to say that I feel puritanical because here it wasn't the sex that irritated me, but the simple existence of these scenes. At no point did they seem necessary to me in the relationship in question, besides sounding forced, and the language sounding a bit awkward. Regarding the new protagonist, while I was excited to see the new couple involved in the political plots, it was disappointing how the protagonist of the first book went on a kind of honeymoon and forget all the things. Like the world was perfect, and if they had such strong plans, why just forget? Why? Why not fight? I also miss more action moments, a faster pace, and actually, apart from a strong scene at the beginning of the book, it's fair to say that nothing happens for about 60% of the story. And above all, I miss the magic and the world building. In the first book, I wasn't so bothered by the lack of world building because I already knew that was going to be a sequel. So I believed it would bring much more world building in the second book, and that didn't happen. 3.5 stars. Welcome to Harker Academy for Defiant Defense. Keep your daggers sharp and your wits even sharper. Viv Abbott is an average 21-year-old girl. She lives in an expensive city where the rent is too high, works long hours at a thankless job, and is dating a guy she doesn't even like in the hopes of winning her princely mother's approval. She just also happens to be a demon hunter. Ever since her father's murder, she's been forced to hunt deviants alone, meaning everyone, including her family, sees her as an outsider. Until the day she crossed paths with a dangerous, alluring demon, Reed Graveheart. The reformed deviant tells her of a school for people just like her, Harker Academy for Deviant Defense. If she enrolls, she will learn to hone her craft, work with other hunters, and never be alone again. But Viv has a deadly secret, one that not even her new friends at Harker can know about. Not, not when the school might hold the answers to untangling the mystery surrounding Viv's father's death. When strange occurrences begin to plague the students, Viv will have to figure out who she can trust, and fast, all while trying to ace her classes, not fall for a demon, and make it through her first year at Harker in one piece. How hard could that be? And this is one of those moments when I think the problem is me. I saw everyone talking about Half City, and immediately I wanted to pick it up. So, mainly because I read another book by Kate Golden a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and I loved it. However, I think Half City wasn't really a book for me, not until 70% of the way through. I want to start by saying that the book starts really strong, and I quickly found myself waiting to know more about the world and the supernatural beings. Just as I ended up being enchanted by the academic setting, At first, I thought it had a touch of Shadowhunters, which I love so much. But then I saw it more like K-pop Demon Hunters with Dark Academy. The writing, although much more juvenile than the other book that I read from the author, entertained me for a good part of the book until I understood what the romance was going to be. And I will need to give a little spoiler, but all the other reviews that I saw talk about it, so let's go. Lately, I come across so many romanticists with romances that don't appeal to me very much, especially those with a power dynamic that always benefits the man. So, and this one is about a professor and a student, and I believe it's one of the relationships that bothers me most, mainly because it takes place in the present day, so they certainly understand the stakes and the problematic of the relationship, and the problematic of this difference in power. And also there is a huge age gap between them. I don't know, they don't seem mature enough for being in this relationship. Oh, in any relationship for that matter. So yeah, in my point of view, constantly seems like he's taking advantage of her in some way, although she always say yes and is always willing to the things they do, and she wants him and he wants her. So yeah, but even even so, that bothered me so much because of the relationship. I feel that couldn't uh, I couldn't connect with the book as much. Even before that, I didn't like Viv very much, and her pick me attitude was, uh, I hate I pick me. I hate I'm not like the other girls. This is so like 2000s, and no. I didn't feel it was totally to impress men, and I need to be clear about that, but she always seemed eager to demonstrate that she was better than everyone. And even she says that she's better than the colleagues in fighting, although she has experience with fighting and they don't. I felt she neglected some friendship quite a bit, but I can't elaborate because spoilers. And to keep with the habit with my other reviews, sex, I felt a little uncomfortable with the steamy scenes and numerous mentions of sex. I felt that the disappearance of a character was also neglected, and it was in favor of the romance. But I started to feel things change exactly in the chapter 40. Was in that moment that I began to like the book again, or at least to see potential in the book. But by by then, we were already 76% of the book. So I don't didn't like about 7% of the book because I liked the beginning, and like the last 30%. I don't know. I I don't know. But this might be precisely the plot twist that will make me continue the series. Because I think I might be a little wrong about the relationships, I hope. The ending and the twists in it certainly made made up for the moments when I felt uncomfortable. And I hope the sequel follows the same rhythm and doesn't return to the same cliches that bother me in Half City. So I recommended it, but bother me to recommend so strongly a book that I didn't like about 70%. A book that is going to be better after 70%. So yeah, I think I'm going to read the next. So 3 stars. Before I talk about the last book, I wanted to talk about how I discovered that Alex Astor, the author of the last book that I read in March, is going to publish the first ever Barbie novel. And all my life, I wished to see more of the ambience of the Barbie movies. And I also literally search Barbie movies, books, vibes, something like that. I am so excited to this book. It's going to launch in August, so I I I actually wish that someone can give me the book, but I will somehow read it in August. Hundreds of years ago, a brutal war split a land in two. Starside is the realm of magic and immortals, the descendants of the gods, living in a power-rich paradise. Stormside is where mortals fight for scraps of that magic. Every 50 years, the gates between them open, and 50 challengers are allowed to journey across Starside on a deadly quest to access a pool of magic that can heal, grant, grant wealthy, or extend life. Everyone has their reasons for entering, but Ares has only vengeance. As a child, a goddess set fire to her village, killing her family. Ares isn't after the gods' magic. She's going to kill them. First, she must survive the cooling, the king's deadly competition to choose his 50 challengers. An open-eared blacksmith's apprentice, Ares doesn't have the superior weapons of the heirs from the great houses, but the greatest swords, ones that contain power, are not inherited or bought. They are claimed by both sides. And when Ares claims a great sword, it makes her not just a real competitor, but a target. Getting past the gates is only the beginning. Starside is deadlier than it seems. If the ancient creatures, magical wielding beasts, and bloodthirsty immortals were the dangerous enough, a new peril has even immortals fearing what rises from the ground at night. With a blade most would kill to claim, Ares can't trust anyone, especially not Harlan Haker, the merciless and mysterious King's Guard who betrayed her years ago, and who may now be the key to her survival. But Ares is hiding a secret side to her family's death, and when it's revealed, not even the gods will be able to stop what's coming. Starside is Alex Astor's first attempt in adult fantasy, and I can say it's a great start. I had already read 3 books from Light Lark, Astor's young adult series, and I always had a lot of fun reading them. And even with some cliche scenes and the very simple writing style, I like it. So I like very much actually. So yeah, and the same happened to Starside. Now speaking especially of the book, is full of adventure and one after another. Action moments one after another, and you have very little time to breathe. So I like that in fantasy, and it's very well written here. The story is frenetic with relatively moderate level of violence, considering the other adult books out there. And the world is very interesting, although simple. It's full of magic creatures, but my favorite was the dragon. Dragons, in this case. No spoilers, I promise. I think it's important to mention that yes, the book has a trial, and I'm getting tired of trials, but I think Alex Astor was able to do a new kind of trial per se, and the structure is somewhat new, and I liked it. The last 30% or so of the book are very intense and even more interesting than what came before. But I also need to say that those final chapters are more violent, and specifically a scene where she's naked made me extremely uncomfortable. But I won't say anything more because yeah, it will be a spoiler. But it seems that the discomfort was exactly what the author was looking for, so yeah. Now I must say the last 5%? Oh my god. Absolutely sensational. I think the writing has evolved chapter after chapter, and yeah, the end is the best part. I guess it the plot twist of the end before I get in the end, but that doesn't make the plot twist be bad at all. The enemies to lovers dynamic is very good, and it has a whole context to it. I was in a non-stop love-hate loop with the male character, and I also need to say that I read this in audiobook, which I always do with Alex Author books, and it was a very good audiobook. And I want to give the narrators immense praise. It was even more exciting to experience everything with their delivery. However, something that bothered me quite a bit, probably because I didn't notice it in the young adult books of Alex Astor, was the insistence of using profanity, and one specific word appears far too many times unnecessarily. Um, I have nothing against profanity in books, but too much of anything can hinder their reading experience. I also found unnecessary the huge chapter with a long sex scene. So yeah, that's that's the only reasons that I don't rate it higher. Finally, I'm sure I'll be thinking about this book many times over the next few months, and I am eager to read what's coming comes next. So 4.5 stars maybe will be favorite one day, probably when I read this sequence. And those were my March reads. You can follow what I am reading right now in my Goodreads here. And at the end of each month, I will do a video like this. And throughout the month, I will also be sharing some videos about what I've been reading, like 24 hours reading, like what can I read in a week, and other topics. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and comment. And I'm also eager to see your book recommendations, especially fantasy books. Don't be shy about talking with me, okay? I'm always available, but I can be a little slow to answer. And speaking of recommendations, every month I will be recommend a song that might mark my month. And in March, it was Gut Punch by Nick Jonas. And I hope you like it as much as I do. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for seeing this video. And I will see you next time.